Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily word. It's Monday, January 11th of the year 2021. We start a new week together. So there's much to do this week, of course, for all of us, and it's surprising how nice it is outside and the beauty of this day and the nice temperatures. Even though it's a little chilly, it's nice for the 11th day of January. So I'm glad you could join me for a few minutes together this morning as we begin our week together. I've chosen for this morning a familiar psalm, one we've read before, but it really fits, I think, our ongoing conversation and situation that we find ourselves in this season of Lent, not in this season of Epiphany as we head rather quickly towards Lent, and this kind of quiet period in life, but yet we're reminded that we're still on this journey together. So hear these words from Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. You've heard me probably talk about, in all of these years, my very first venture of climbing the chimneys in Tennessee. You go out of Gatlinburg south and you kind of make your way through the mountains and you arrive at a place where you get off out of your car. For us, we were in a bus and they let us out and you are at the base of the chimney tops. And from there, you kind of make your way and you kind of meander. So I'd agreed to take our youth group with my brother's youth group. He was pastoring a church in Columbus at the time. And we went on a bus called the Circuit Rider. And I had agreed to take our youth and we got on the bus and it was a grand time. And I was looking forward to our weekend together and the climbing of the mountain and all of those things that happened that weekend. I was ill prepared, mind you, for what was about to happen. It was an interesting challenge. We had one young man in my group who had never left the state of Ohio, had rarely, maybe ever left Shelby County. And so that trip on the bus was an anxiety-ridden challenge for him and required a couple extra stops for him. But we arrived early on Saturday morning. We ate breakfast and then it came time to climb the mountain. And so if you've ever heard this story before, and probably you have from me, the first mile and a tenth is, pretty easy. You go across a couple bridges, the terrain's pretty level, but then you reach a point where you make a hard right turn. And the elevation and the climb and the challenge begins to change. And so we rather heartily made the right turn and made our way. And the farther we went, the slower I got. And this was a long time ago. The slower I got, and the slower I got. And the kids, of course, are way ahead of us, and we would make them wait, and we'd catch up, and then they'd take off again, and we'd catch up, and they'd take off again. We finally made it to the top. Not without, however, a lot of encouragement, a lot of prayer, a lot of pulling on my arm to get me to go to the top because, frankly, I wasn't sure I was going to even go at all and might have been content just to stop right in the middle of that hike. It took the encouragement of lots of people to get me up there. Psalm 121 is known as the Traveler's Psalm, the Traveler's Psalm. It was sung or spoken in the hilly area of Jerusalem as people traveled to the festivals. And travel in those days, of course, was exhausting. And when people reached their final destination, the hill of Jerusalem, they rejoiced. But over those hills and on the way, they needed motivation for the final push to make their way. Psalm 121 is that motivation for that final push of their journey. I lift my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from God, the maker of heaven and earth. And that song became their motivation. And I think about the journeys I've made up to the top of the chimney since. I was determined after that first time that the next time I was going to be prepared. And so I got myself in much better shape. I walked on the treadmill, but also part of it was knowing what the destination was and knowing the outcome. And so those next journeys made it more possible to reach the top. You know, in other words, for us, as we hear this psalm, the hill might be high, my knees, as they were then, and goodness, now would be screaming bloody murder, but God is greater. Challenges shrink and confidence rises when we remember the goodness and greatness of our God. I've made it to the top of the chimneys 14 times. Frankly, I'll never make it again. I've just settled for that. My days of hiking are over. I just want to walk, which is not, if you saw me walk today, you would wonder why I even decided to walk at all today. I'm really in a lot of pain. But it's more about hiking. It's more than about hiking. It's more than about walking and climbing hills. You see, we face in life these unique challenges. Talked yesterday about the baptism of Jesus and our own baptism and how that made a difference in our life, and that we can always refer back to that we are baptized and we are people of God. But it's also a reminder from the psalmist that we will face life's hills and valleys. Our knees, our hearts, our spirits even will scream like we can't make it. We often want to give up and not go on to the next phase of our journey. But the psalmist reminds us, you know, that God is always present with us. And the goodness and the greatness of God is what gets us to the next mountain, over the top, to the next place. Now, for me to say to you, I'm never going to hike again, I believe that to be true, because I don't think I can get there from here. I would be shocked. But that doesn't mean I've lost my faith. That doesn't mean I don't trust in God. It means that my hike, my journey, my challenge is just different. But in all of it, for wherever we are in life, you know, it is true that our help comes from God, who's the maker of heaven and earth. To hear these words from verse 3 and verse 4, he will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Indeed, the Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. I think those are words that we need to hear and to hold on to. God doesn't let our foot slip. God watches over us in all of our lives. It may be that our lives are different, like mine is going to be, that I won't ever reach the pinnacle of the chimneys again. But those challenges that are before me for the rest of my life, it is God who helped me before, who again decides to help again and again and again and pushes us on. And so, friends, I pray that in these challenging days, when we hear of and see what happened in Washington, D.C. the other day, and when we see the challenges still before us in the midst of our lives, and as we begin this new year together, to know that God is always our help, always our guide, always the life that we need in the midst of our lives. And if we look to God and know that God doesn't let our foot slip and that God doesn't slumber but guides us, we enter into each day confidently. And so, if you followed me along at all, you know that I decided that every day this year I want to write this new challenge in life and write a new chapter. I've had to redecide what that's going to look like because, I'm I was pretty active, like to play sports and all those things and hike and all those things. Now my life's different, not in a bad way, just in a way that requires me to write a new chapter. And with God, we all do that as we live our lives. So I pray that your chapter might be filled with the presence of God and that you'll look up to the heavens and know that God is the one who leads us and guides us. I pray for peace in your lives these days. I pray for peace that overcomes and helps us understand God's presence. I pray for mercy and grace, and I pray for God's love to surround you and to enfold you. And I pray that you'll know my love for all of you. Lift up your eyes to the hills and know your help comes from God. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m.